There is a single company that controls the entire military industrial complex, the whole food industry, the oil and energy sectors, every plane, train, and most cars in America. They own the water utility companies, the hospitals, and the funeral homes. This one company that controls just about every other company and corporation in the Western world. And today, I'm going to show you with publicly available open source information that's easy to find for yourself who this is and how we know it. We are, of course, talking about the Blackrock Conspiracy. It's one of the most widely known and also widely misunderstood conspiracies of our day. So today, we're going to unpack the real Blackrock Conspiracy. What do we really mean when we say that BlackRock owns everything? I've been doing this research for about 2 years now, and I think it's finally time to put it all together into one long-form video and lay out the whole thing and unpack who really owns the world.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
So it was about 2 years ago on a Sunday that I was walking through my local supermarket thinking about how I just learned that tampons are full of endocrine disruptors and reprotoxic chemicals. I just started a TikTok account 2 months prior dedicated to researching and learning about how the world works, and I had just done a report on tampons. And it's insane. Somehow it's just accepted medical practice of today that once a month for several days, women just stick a chemical soaked sponge into one of the most sensitive mucous membranes on their bodies, right next to their uterus and ovaries and all that. They basically inject themselves with a whole cocktail of chemicals well known to damage reproductive organs and dysregulate hormones and cause cancer. Researchers found glyphosate at 40 times the legal limit for drinking water. They found arsenic, lead, cobalt, mercury, and cadmium, among many other chemicals and heavy metals. My comments on the last video that I had made about the topic were flooded with stories of women saying that when they switched to organic cotton tampons or to Diva cups, their periods became way less painful, way less intense, basically overnight. And then, of course, there was a bunch of free bleeders just getting wild in there too. It was total anarchy. But I'm in the grocery store and I have this epiphany that seems really simple to me now. Like, I wonder if there are any organic cotton tampons in this grocery store. So I go to the tampon aisle and I take some photos of the selection available. And little did I know that those tampons, these ones right here, would change my life. Like, no joke, that tampon aisle quite directly led to me going on Joe Rogan and hosting the Candace Owens show and sitting here now talking to you. God works in mysterious ways. Because I discovered what we all already kind of know is that in most grocery stores, there's actually very little choice. Even when it looks like there are so many different brands to choose from, of the whole tampon section in that store, maybe 5% or less of the shelf space was devoted to organic, natural cotton tampons that didn't have poison in them. They were hidden way off in the corner out of sight. That's the blue section way over on the right. The bulk of the aisles was colorful boxes from all the big brands advertising Sport Fit and Freedom Flow and Comfort Care and just all sorts of made-up menstrual buzzwords. Colored here in red, orange, yellow, and pink. But turn the packages around and read the ingredients, and they're all the exact same product. A synthetic plastic-filled franking cloth with PFAS and bleach and other toxic chemicals laced all throughout. Just kidding. You actually can't read the ingredients because tampons aren't required to list their ingredients on the box. So trust the science, right? But you have dozens of choices of size and fit and flex and just about anything else except whether or not you want to poison your reproductive organs and disrupt your hormones. That option came in a tiny blue box hidden way up high in one little obscure corner. And if I had to guess, I would think that it probably accounts for less than 1% of the grocery store's tampon sales. I even discovered that one of the brands, Stay Free, which is highlighted here in pink, is owned by Energizer, the battery company. I'm serious. This happened all the way back in 2013, and I'll bet that basically no woman that buys Stay Free knows that she's buying from a battery company. Like, they should make their sizing named after battery sizes if they're going to do that. Like, you can just get your AAAs or your AA's or your super extra heavy flow D battery. I mean, tampons. Anyways, once I looked up who owned all the mega corporations that were selling these tampons, I learned that they're all owned by the same shadowy financial cabal, foreshadowing the first layer of the Blackrock conspiracy theory. And we'll get into the whole thing in just a minute. And yes, for all the finance bros out there, don't worry. We know about beneficial ownership and what fund managers do. That is a part of this story. And for everyone jumping out of their chairs to say like BlackRock doesn't actually own any of those shares, don't worry. We will get to that layer in just a bit. But first, I became obsessed and I started doing this in every aisle of the grocery store, coloring in which colors, which items on the shelves were owned by the general mega corporate blob and which ones were founder and family owned, etc. I did shampoo and deodorant and baby food, and I found out that some aisles are even worse than the tampon aisle. There are plenty of aisles in your grocery store where every single option is owned by the same singular mega corporate mass of just banker money. It's not just BlackRock. There's a whole rabbit hole that we're about to go down. But for example, the shampoo aisle at Target. To this day, it's probably my most viral video ever. There are whole aisles at Target where every single product is sold to you by the same bankers. And a bunch of these shampoos and conditioners are in class action lawsuits for causing hair loss. And one even faced accusations for making people's hair catch on fire. That's a true story. You can look it up. Those very same companies, though, they market hair regrowth products right there in the same aisle from the same company. Problem, solution. Baby food and baby formula was even worse because not only are there entire grocery stores where your only options are all owned by the same banking money black hole, but then I discovered this report written by the House Oversight Committee about toxic heavy metals in baby food, featuring all the brands that I had just been researching in the baby food aisle, because all of these brands that are featured in this report were the ones owned by the banking cartel mega corporations. There were way too many messed up findings in the report to cover them all here. And I would say that you should go find this report for yourself, but when I was getting ready for this video and checked back in on this report, it had been mysteriously taken down off of the government site where it had been hosted. So it's kind of weird. You can probably go find it on archive.org though, I would imagine. But just to give a summary, the report lists levels of various heavy metals that were determined by the FDA to be acceptable in food products. And then it goes on to say, quote, the test results of baby foods and their ingredients eclipse those levels, including results up to 91 times the arsenic level, up to 177 times the lead level, up to 69 times the cadmium level, and up to 5 times the mercury level. As in, yeah, you are reading that correctly. Some of these baby foods were testing at 177 times the acceptable level of lead in baby food. Not 177%, 177 times. That is 17,700% the legal limit of lead in baby food. And we wonder why we have a chronic disease epidemic. This is in the baby food, folks. It's babies. It's not even the regular food. But I didn't stop there. I looked up everything from detergent to cereal. Remember, colored in red means it's owned by the same banking cartel, most notably BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street. We'll get to that in just a minute. I did sauces, ice cream, dressings. Some types of products had more variety than others. Some aisles had a lot of family and founder-owned brands to choose from. But in the end, you start to realize what many of us all already kind of know, but have never quite visualized. All of our abundance, all of our foods and drinks and soaps and lotions, everything else. Thousands and thousands of brands to choose from, but it's actually all owned by just a handful of mega corporations. And now this is where we peel back the next layer of the onion. Because if you wanted to know who owns any given product, like say Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, which is one of my favorite examples, you can search that on the internet for yourself. This is what I was doing for every single product on those grocery store aisle shelves, and it took forever. So you search that, and you'll find out that Clorox owns Hidden Valley Ranch dressing, which is a bit alarming and not exactly what you were probably hoping to find. And notice that this is old news too. Clorox acquired Hidden Valley Ranch in 1972. They've been making the ranch since before most of you were born. But then the inquisitive mind might ask, who owns Clorox? And the answer is that Clorox is a publicly traded company. I like to call it a mega corporation, but it just means that they sell shares and your finance bro buddy on Wall Street Bets can YOLO his fat bag into the stock and hope it goes to the moon. And this means that Clorox is owned by its shareholders. So, who are these shareholders? If you want to know who owns a public company like Clorox, the phrase you need to search for is institutional ownership. Because while your buddy who trolls Wall Street Bets for the next short squeeze might be able to buy some shares, he's really just a tiny little germ compared to the big boys, the banks. So you're looking for the top institutional shareholders. And for Clorox, it's all these guys. Vanguard, Blackrock, State Street, Geode Capital Management, Morgan Stanley, FMR is Fidelity, Stifel Financial Corporation, they're not a common one, Citadel Advisors, Royal Bank of Canada, Champlain Investment Partners, LLC. Collectively, just quick math, looks like these top 10 owners collectively own about 35% of the company. And that's pretty typical. The more of this research you do, the more you realize that these sheets always seem to look the same. Dave's Killer Bread, not owned by Dave. Sorry, it was bought by Flowers Foods, a mega corporation. And they're owned by Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, plus a bunch of banks and fund managers. General Mills, JP Morgan, Norfolk Southern, American Waterworks, top owners, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, highlighted in red, plus all the banks and financial institutions and investment firms making up the rest of the lists. You start looking at entire industries, and you realize that the same is true for all of the biggest corporations in every industry, like food and beverage, banking, big tech. Each of those images collaged together is an individual ownership sheet like the ones we were just looking at for Clorox, and highlighted in red on each sheet are Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street, almost always the top 3 spots, i.e. the top 3 shareholders. The same is true for the oil industry and for the green energy industry, even literally for hospice, funeral care, and cemetery homes. They're buying those too. Because if you're going to make money poisoning people right out the gate in the baby food, I mean, why not also make money when they die, right? So, as I did all this research across basically every industry in the economy, I found the same major thing over and over and over again. It's a big club, and we are not in it. So naturally, I got curious just how much of the stock market of all the publicly traded companies do BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street actually own? Like, how big is their share or slice of the pie? So I took the top 100 companies on the US market, companies that you're very familiar with, like Tesla, Pfizer, Starbucks, Verizon, Lockheed Martin, Home Depot, normal companies, the big ones, the top 100. And I built a giant spreadsheet that scraped their stock ownership information live off the web and into my charts. And then I used all that data to build this sheet showing what percentage of the top 100 companies in America are owned by each of these investment firms, banks, and billionaires. And even though I had already been doing this research for months, this kind of shocked me. Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street combined represent more than $5 trillion invested in the top 100 companies. On the right of this chart, you can see that collectively, that represents 42.2% of all the shares of ownership in the top 100 companies. If you expand your scope to the 25 biggest financial institutions, they collectively own 83% of the shares. 83%. This is just the top 25 biggest financial institutions. There are hundreds of them above us on these lists. So now, it's important to slow down and explain what a share actually is. Like, what does it represent? What does it mean? Because a lot of us think of shares of stock as something nebulous, like a form of gambling for white guys in suits, and kind of, but a share is way more than that. A share is a share of ownership of a company, and it's a share of the voting rights for how that company is run. Because in a sick way, all of these companies are actually run democratically, except that you buy your votes. Like, the more shares you own, the more votes you get. So if you own 10% of the shares, you get 10% of the voting rights. It's actually pretty simple. You don't vote on every tiny little thing the company is going to do, like what color the packaging will be or how many Cheerios go into a box, but you vote on the big things, like major policies that the company is going to adopt or reject. Shareholders can introduce their own items for voting. In the 2010s, one of the most popular ones were like various versions of sustainability initiatives like eco-friendly packaging, zero emission commitments, stuff like that. Almost every company in the American market was voting on those sorts of initiatives over the last decade, and there is a reason why that we will get to. But most importantly, shareholders vote on who will sit on the board of directors, and they are the ones that guide the company and hire and fire the executives that actually run the company on the day-to-day, like the CEO, CFO, COO. It's a lot of C names. Those guys are called the C-suite because they're all chiefs, you know? So they, the C-suite, are hired and fired by the board of directors, who we elect with our shared voting rights. And all of this is determined by shareholder voting. The more shares you own, the more votes you get. You see where this is going yet? Because this is where we kind of crush the typical Blackrock conspiracy theories that you've probably seen all over YouTube and Reddit and wherever else. This is where the finance bros are all screaming that BlackRock doesn't actually own the shares, and that's kind of correct. But let's start by just meeting the big three: Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. Although State Street is actually owned by BlackRock now, so it's kind of awkward. But anyways, these guys are investment management firms, and you probably are invested with them. At least if you're old enough and well off enough to have any sort of retirement account or investment savings account or anything like that. Maybe if you dabble in buying ETFs or index funds or the like. The big three mostly manage other people's money for them. They invested across wide sweeping portfolios of stocks to just like minimize risk and make your wealth grow slowly over time without, losing it all. Vanguard pioneered this mutual fund model decades ago, and then BlackRock elevated it with popularization of index and exchange traded funds. So now you buy a share of, let's say, I don't know, BlackRock's Voltron 3000 fund or whatever. I just made that up. BlackRock's Voltron 3000 fund has a whole bunch of shares of 3,000 different companies all across the markets in its portfolio. And you have a tiny little slice of that portfolio and of its profit or loss, right? So because your risk is now spread out across 3,000 different stocks, you're not going to lose it all when Circuit City goes bankrupt because you thought it was going to go to the moon. But you also won't get rich when GameStop does go to the moon. So, whatever. They don't really want you getting rich anyways. So it's true, though. Most of the money that the big three manage is not their own money. Most of it is actually our retirement accounts, like trillions of dollars of our retirement accounts. So all the halfwits out there that just accept what they're told in business school as like gospel fact think, oh, nothing to see here. It's all good, bro. BlackRock doesn't actually own any of these companies. They're just holding it for us. Like, right? Sort of. You can look this up for yourself. It's not hard to figure out. When you buy a share of a mutual fund or an index fund or an exchange traded fund, all the types of products that the big three are selling, you sign over your voting rights to the fund managers, to BlackRock. Sure, they are managing your money, but they are also managing your voting power. You are now a beneficial owner of a share of their fund, not the underlying shares of the corporations they are investing in on your behalf. And so, when we say that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street own 42% of all the shares in the top 100 companies on the market, that means that they control 42% of the voting power. Add in their buddies, and the top 25 financial institutions control 83% of the voting power. That means they control all of these companies. They pick the boards of directors. They pick the policies. They decide how things are going to run, when companies will do share buybacks or dividends, all the rest of it. Obviously, they're not all powerful, but by the rules of their own game, they've basically got it all locked down. And perhaps most subtle and sinister of all, this changes the nature of capitalism in a fundamental way. Because fiduciary duty is a legal term binding these companies and their chief officers to act in the best interest of their shareholders. And honestly, this makes perfect sense. The whole point of a public company is that this company serves our whole community or country or state or whatever it is, and we can all buy into it and have a say in how it's run. And in exchange for taking our investment money, they have a duty to do what's best for us, the investors. But that's not how the world works today. We are not the investors that they are beholden to anymore. Now, all of these companies' fiduciary duty is to the bankers and the fund managers and the Larry Finks of this world. They are legally bound to do what is best for them, not for you. And if it's best for them to sell baby food with 177 times the legal amount of lead in it, well, they're gonna do it. If it's best for them to sell you untested pharmaceutical products, then they're gonna do it. If they'll make more money filling the food with drugs and poisons, not only are they gonna do it, they are legally obligated to. It's their fiduciary duty, and they can actually be fired if they don't. But now, real quick, we cannot talk about BlackRock without also mentioning the genie in the bottle, Larry Fink's financial supercomputer, Aladdin. So Aladdin stands for Asset, Liability, and Debt and Derivative Investment Network. He just wanted a cool name. And it is one of the oldest financial computer systems and artificial intelligence systems on the planet. It began all the way back in 1988 as mostly a pipe dream, Larry Fink's vision for how computing could revolutionize financial markets. And oh boy, was he right. So Aladdin is sort of a supercomputer that monitors billions and billions of trades and assets and investments across global markets and constantly is assessing and reassessing risk. It's more often used to monitor risk on a portfolio of assets rather than to actually trade in the market, but its use cases are vast and ever expanding. Aladdin is the largest AI system operating the financial markets today by a wide margin, at least as best as I can understand, but there isn't a lot of oversight or reporting on the topic, so I'm not really sure that we would even know if the CIA or someone else had some other supercomputer running behind the scenes. But Aladdin is the biggest that we know of right now. Because it's not just BlackRock that uses Aladdin. Although BlackRock does sport somewhere in the ballpark of $11 trillion worth of assets of its own that Aladdin helps oversee, all the way back in 2000, they started selling Aladdin's services to other firms. And because BlackRock does not publicly disclose its client lists either, no one really knows exactly how much of the market Aladdin monitors and manages. But in 2020, the Financial Times produced one of the most substantial reports to date about the platform and reported that, quote, Vanguard and State Street Global Advisors, the largest fund managers after BlackRock, are users, as are half of the top 10 insurers by assets, as well as Japan's $1.5 trillion government pension fund, the world's largest, Apple, Microsoft, and Google's parent firm Alphabet, the three biggest U.S. public companies, all rely on the system to steward hundreds of billions of dollars in their corporate treasury investment portfolios. The report claimed that only counting 1/3 of Aladdin's 240 clients, just those clients represented a balance sheet of $21.6 trillion in assets under management. The entire GDP of the United States is only about $27 trillion. So if just 1/3 of Aladdin's clients represent $21 trillion, one can only assume that Aladdin is overseeing somewhere in the ballpark of $50 to $60 trillion of assets across most of the world's biggest banks and financial institutions and public companies and, oh yeah, and the government. A lot of people don't know that BlackRock is in the government bailout business. All the way back in 2008, the Federal Reserve came to them, it came to Larry Fink specifically because he had kind of invented the whole mortgage-backed security thing that was destroying the entire global financial system, but it's a little more complicated than that. It's a long story, another day. So anyways, the Fed back in 2008 goes to Larry and asks him to help them out with his supercomputer Aladdin and tell them how to spend all of our taxpayer bailout money that we never voted to give to them. And then Aladdin distributed it to all of Larry's buddies and whatnot and saved the world. Such a great guy. I'm sure that Aladdin was entirely impartial and that those bailouts didn't directly benefit BlackRock in any particular way. At least, I hope not, because the Fed went back to Larry in 2020 when the coronavirus hit, and they asked Larry and his boy Aladdin to help fix the markets again. So, BlackRock, who sells all sorts of financial products like shares of exchange-traded funds that they manage, advised the government on how to invest billions of dollars of COVID bailout money. But I am sure, of course, again, that there was no conflict of interest there at all. It's all good. Aladdin, it's worth noting, is just one of the AI agents currently acting upon and determining how vast swaths of the market will trend and function. There are hundreds, thousands of other bots and AI algorithms and Palantir black magic, you name it. The market has not been entirely or even mostly human in a long time. But anyways, bit of a tangent about robots taking over the world. So to summarize so far, BlackRock is one of the biggest money managers in the world. They invest other people's money by making these various funds that you buy into, and they hold the stocks for everyone. But then they wind up holding so much of the stock of the whole market that they have the biggest share of vote at every corporate election all across all of the biggest American businesses. Because remember, they vote pretty much all the shares that they manage. That includes trillions of dollars of all of America's retirement accounts that get invested in these funds. That's all of regular America's shared saved wealth. All the bottom 95% of us, or whatever number. And whereas that percentage of the capital in the American markets is supposed to be representing us and our interests, it winds up representing Larry and his buddies and their agendas for the markets and for their bank accounts. And Larry is well known for his policy of pushing markets and companies to make changes that he wants. He spent a good chunk of the last decade pushing everyone towards versions of ESG and DEI in very overt and real ways.
You now make a point of that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we're doing internally is if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted, and that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
So, that's how Larry feels about his seat at the top of the markets and the power that he wields. And he was the champion of ESG and of DEI for the last 10 years. And that was what he was talking about. He was talking about forcing companies to be more DEI using his share voting rights as leverage. Or your compensation or even your job might change, right? Because BlackRock votes all of those shares in Larry's and his advisors and friends and allies' interests, every executive knows that they likely only have a job if they go along with Larry's broader agenda. Otherwise, he and his buddies can easily just team up and kick you out of the club. And that's how you get to a big club that you are not in. And when you start mapping out the club, as in mapping out the board of directors of each of these companies, you start to notice some patterns. You start to notice connections. Mostly, you just start learning a lot of wild stuff about how the world really works. Take, for example, the board of BlackRock. This map actually hasn't been updated since last year. They added Bill Demchak, who is a triathlete. And it actually sounds pretty cool, honestly. He comes from PNC, which is a gigantic bank, and he recruited from his employees for an Ironman triathlon team. Granted, that was like 10 years ago now. All the articles about it are behind paywalls that I'm not paying for, but that's dope, you know. Nice job for not being a lazy millionaire, bro. They also added Adebayo Ogunlesi. Adebayo Ogunlesi. Sorry, bro, about your name. I mean about me pronouncing it. I don't know much of anything about him yet, obviously. Haven't done the dive, but I can't help but notice that he came from Credit Suisse First Boston. And if you don't know what happened to Credit Suisse and how a chain reaction from the GameStop squeeze rippled all the way up to collapsing one of the world's most important banks and nearly toppling the whole global system? Wild rabbit hole. Look up what happened at Archegos Capital Management. But anyways, that's Adebayo. The rest of this web is pretty interesting, and they are all current. This is the hottest booth in the club. This is like that front row, poppin' champagne, billionaire lifestyles club. Whatever things they want, they got it. This table is one of the most influential in the world. There's plenty of other tables out there with plenty of sleazy billionaires sitting at them, but this one is not far from the top, I would reckon. On the left, in a straight row, you have Susan Wagner, Rob Capito, and Larry Fink, 3 of the 5 original founders. Bottom left, a little cluster that includes Marco Antonio Slim Domit, the son of Carlos Slim, the richest man in Mexico. I'm sure that relationship comes with all sorts of interesting connections and influences and exchange of favors behind the scene between Larry Fink and Blackrock, its other board members, and the Slim family. After all, who do you think really runs Mexico? Do you think it's their elected leader or the super rich banker? And I'm just throwing out a wild guess here, but I would assume that the richest banker in Mexico probably knows a thing or two about the cartels and all sorts of other powerful people down there. Just pure speculation. And while we're here, I'll also point out Fabrizio Freda. He's been the president and CEO of Estee Lauder since 2009, and he is apparently retiring at the end of fiscal year 2025. And if you don't know about Estee Lauder, let's just say that the Lauders have some very powerful friends. Like, for example, Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, who you can see at the very bottom above the red logo for The Economist. She's on the board of Estee Lauder, along with Fabrizio. Lynn Forrester is the CEO, I should say Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, is the CEO and director of E.L. Rothschild LLC and has been on the board of Estee Lauder since 2000. The Rothschilds have a good bit of history with the Lauders. Both also have a good deal of old history with various aspects of organized crime in America and obviously countless lifelong connections to the state of Israel. Whitney Webb authored a really good article that you can find on Mint Press News about Ronald Lauder's various connections to and through the Mega Group, which is a very hush-hush group of Jewish billionaires that had numerous ties to Epstein. When you zoom out on the club, you start to see how many of these guys hop between and occupy multiple board positions at various companies in the club. All of these lines that are crisscrossing between the clusters are various places where someone is in 2 seats at once or more. And these are just among the relatively small number of companies that I've mapped out. The network of foundations and NGOs and corporations and colleges and nonprofits and everything else that these guys are climbing up through the ranks to put on their resume, the more I read about them, the more they just look like a ladder that everyone is climbing in their own personal way, trying to reach as high as possible towards some unattainable top of the game, which, to be fair, the board of Blackrock is pretty damn close to the top of that game. Because I would imagine that there's a sort of natural capitalistic hierarchy to the various seats at the various tables in this club. Certain tables are more powerful or prestigious than others. Each man and woman scrabbling to be the most shrewd or the most efficient, the most triathletic, or whatever the hell you think is going to keep you in the club climbing upwards. And so, as you start to look around, you can't help but notice things like how the former CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is on the board of Pfizer. And you read her bio real quick, and you might ask yourself, what is National Resilience Inc? I've never heard of that before. Must be important for the former CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to be involved, right? And so you get curious and you look it up and you realize that you have just found the company that manufactured most of the RNA material for the COVID shots all throughout the pandemic. I'm not sure if they're still involved or not, but I am sure that the CEO of the CIA's investment firm called In-Q-Tel was on the board alongside Ol Sue, which is extremely interesting because that rather directly implies that the CIA was rather directly involved in this company and whatever it is that they were doing. They didn't just invest in this company, they put their own In-Q-Tel CEO on the board, along with Sue Hellman. And along with Sue Hellman, there are also Palantir and FDA connections on this board, actually. It's a whole rabbit hole, and the implications are far-reaching and inspire a lot of interesting and sort of uncomfortable questions. You see, these are the kinds of things you start to notice and learn when you just start poking around in the club and learning stuff. Anyways, while we're at the board of Pfizer, both Pfizer and Resilience also have Scott Gottlieb, the former head of the FDA, on their board. The FDA is the government institution that is supposed to be regulating Pfizer and the vaccine industry. So, pop over to the board of Johnson & Johnson, and it only looks the normal amount of corrupt and sketchy, at least until you do a little extra research, gain a little extra context. And Macy Beckerell is that lady up at the top with the dark hair who used to work at the American Cancer Society and the NIH and all of these other health-related industries, science-related positions, all throughout her long career. Well, the vibe completely shifts when you learn that Johnson & Johnson knew for decades that their baby powder was contaminated with asbestos, and for decades, they actively covered it up. Not that they were ignorant, they actively covered it up and kept profiting off of poisoning babies. So, what good is a long career fighting cancer, Macy, when you preside over a company that is selling mothers baby powder full of asbestos? And listen, I don't know how involved in this cover-up Macy was, or if she even knew about it at all. I am just pointing out that in general, Johnson & Johnson does not stack their board of directors with people involved in the American Hospital Association and the American Cancer Society and the National Cancer Institute, the National Academy of Medicine, etc., 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 because they want to protect you from cancer. They stack their board this way because it makes them money. You start to research how and why that might be, and you'll wind up in all sorts of places, none of them good. Or at least, not for you. All great for Alex Gorski, though. He was one of the industry's highest paid CEOs until he retired in 2022, raking in most years around $30 million. That was just a few years after it came out that his entire tenure and long before Johnson & Johnson had been keeping this asbestos scandal under wraps. J&J paid a $700 million fine, which was pennies compared to the profit, I am sure. It's just the tax that you got to pay sometimes for doing business in the fast and loose lane. And that's the lane that far too many of these people in the club live in. And these companies, generally doing whatever's necessary to make profit increase, is what shapes our world. Partly because all of their companies' policies govern what we do, what we buy, how we live, how much our cell phone bill is, how much our medical bills are, what our water utilities cost, all sorts of things. But also, in a broader sense, they all are constantly sucking wealth up and out the top of this corporate matrix to deposit it in the accounts of their buddies at the top shareholders of these companies. Tactics like share buybacks allow the companies to pay out all the extra money that they're hoarding and distribute it to their shareholders, i.e. their bosses, the big banks, the investment firms, and the folks at BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. After COVID, when pharma companies had this magical windfall of billions and billions of taxpayer dollars, they all did stock buybacks, not just the pharma companies either. It's a way that these companies just shovel our nation's wealth into the accounts of all of the biggest financial institutions. On this graph, you can see the purple representing corporate dividends and green representing stock buybacks. The trend upwards over time is obvious. But you notice how all the buybacks surge right before 2008? Yeah. It's almost like they knew something was coming and they all loaded up before it. Even when it's taxpayer dollars paying for mandatory vaccines, which is paying for the most recent and biggest surge on the chart, represented from 2021 to 2022, they have no qualms about packing that away for later as well. So, anyways, there I was, about a half year into researching, and I'm realizing how tied together and corrupted and vast this whole system is. How powerful and systemic this club is to our capitalist society. We all want to save up for the future and make a good life for our kids, for our families. We work real hard to get ahead, buying all these guys' poison products and climbing up ladders. And we finally get ahead and start saving or start racking up a retirement account, and then we're told to invest it. Put all that money into safe funds that will make your money grow. These bankers, like Larry, that run all of those funds that you're investing in, they use the voting capital of all of the American people's savings, and he and his buddies open and close the doors to the club with that voting power. They shape the culture and the climate of capitalism in America. And none of us ever notice it. We don't know anything about it. A few of these guys run media companies and such that pump out entertainment and news about the latest celebrity drama to keep you distracted. But these are the people who actually move the world with their decisions for better and for worse. These are the people that we should know about. And most of them really don't want you paying much attention to them. And the more I know about them, the less I trust them, the less inclined I am to buy into their system. So I started opting out of it. Somewhere along the way, after a few months, I started making spreadsheets of family and founder-owned brands that I was finding in all these grocery store aisles. Because they aren't in the club. They aren't incentivized to appease the bankers that hired them, because they didn't. Family-owned businesses are incentivized to do whatever will make you and me want to buy their product. And that's not always the most ethical or healthy or the best brand on the shelf, but in my mind, it seems way more likely that it is. Plus, they have to be way more innovative, way more dedicated, way more invested in their own business. That's just naturally going to be a more human system most times. And when I buy from smaller family and founder-owned businesses, my money tends to stay in the community. They pay local workers. They are tied into more local supply chains. When the family-owned barber needs a remodel, they're more likely to go to a local contractor who's more likely going to go to the local hardware store. It shrinks the circle so much and keeps your money in your community, enriching the people around you. When a giant corporation needs to remodel, they're more likely going to another mega corporate type firm and getting it all done there. They pay workers in faraway places and have supply chain footprints that span the globe. It's not to mention that they're paying their CEOs like $10 to $20 million a year, and sometimes more. So I made these spreadsheets and put them on my website, and they're still up there for now. CancelThisClothingCompany.com. There's a tab for resources. It's a very simple website. I'm just a very simple dude. I'm just using Google Sheets, nice and easy. I don't have any team doing this stuff with me. I am just learning stuff and sharing what I find. The sheets have all different industries and grocery aisles, and they have every different company that I found and researched and marked down by hand who owns it and all that stuff. There's some funny notes in there too. Eventually, I started collecting a master sheet of all of the founder and family-owned brands that I was finding across all different aisles and industries. And I just gave these out for free. And some of the real deal homies out there would refer to them in the grocery store and use them to find and support more local and smaller businesses whenever and wherever they could. It was a whole journey, and we did it together on TikTok in the early days, before most of you guys probably met me on X or Rogan or Candace or wherever you did meet me. For everyone with the crazy Ian Carroll conspiracy theories about how I popped up out of nowhere and it's so suspicious, this is where I popped out of. This is what we were doing on TikTok, and it went super viral. It absolutely aced the TikTok algorithm for several months. I am a very fortunate man, apparently. But I also think that it was because we all feel this thing about America these days, like about a lot of the world. We feel how something is not right. Like the system is just not working in our favor. In fact, it actually feels like the world is actively keeping everyone down. And yeah, life's hard, but that hardship doesn't have to come from a corrupt financial system robbing you daily of your life's time and work and value. There is so much abundance, so many resources, and so much technological advancement, and yet somehow life is getting harder for most people. People are being buried under debt and worked to the bone, and we should be thriving, but something is keeping us all down. And we all sort of know that it's probably this amorphous blob of financial corruption. It's the club. It's the cumulative actions of all of these ultra wealthy bankers and money managers all pushing and pulling on the strings that move our world. And it's not just some grand conspiracy necessarily, like the Illuminati sitting around a shadowy table, but it's a bunch of people sitting around a bunch of tables, and their jobs are literally all to plot and scheme the rise of their seat and their table to the highest possible score. Mostly, they do these schemes within the bounds of the law. But we have countless examples of groups of these assholes doing all sorts of illegal shit too. Not to mention deeply amoral and even evil things. And I think we all want something we can do about it. Like, even if it's just a somewhat symbolic fuck you to the system, we want something we can do about it. But this isn't just symbolic. Large numbers of Americans shifting their buying power can make huge impacts. It can change everything. Really, these days, it kind of seems like money is the only thing that can change anything. Imagine if millions of Americans all changed how they shopped in 1 year and gave just like 10% less money to all of these shitty corporations that are poisoning us and hoarding money. Just that 10% could change everything. Well, earlier this year, a couple dudes who have spent the last several years building apps together had that exact same thought. And they saw what I was doing with my spreadsheets, and they realized, like myself and like many of you realized, that this needs to be an app. The function that these spreadsheets are serving needs to become an app and become 10,000 times more useful. And so they started building it. And I was immediately in. As soon as I met them, 100% value alignment and in it for the right reasons, which was my number one criteria in meeting them. And we've been building an app that tells you who owns all the products in the store. It does what all the other scanning apps do too, like telling you about the nutrition and the macros. It helps you filter for ingredients you do or don't want. It's got a pantry and shopping list you can share among your household. It's got funny, sort of spicy details about the various companies that own everything on the shelves. It's a whole deal. It's currently in beta testing. We had it out to the first round of 200 over the last 2 weeks or so. We are launching right now to the next 800, bringing us up to 1,000 beta testers. And we've got well over 10,000 total signups. It's more like 15 or 17,000 total signups as of today. And that whole signup list will get into the next round of beta testing. It's free. If you want to sign up, you can join the beta too. We'll never sell your data without your explicit consent. This is just what it is. It's an app made by 3 dudes with no outside investors, no strings attached, and we hope it'll make the world a slightly better place. We are not going to sell ratings or anything like that. We aren't even assigning ratings. We're just going to give you information and let you decide how that should affect your buying habits. The whole idea of the beta test is for you guys to help us build it, give us feedback, and tell us how to make the tool the most useful for you. And if you're seeing this video after it's been out for like a month or two, you can actually probably go to the app and download it off the Play Store or the App Store for free right now. It's coming out in just a few months. Try it out, scan some products, see who owns them, what's in them, think about who you're buying from, and what that does for you and for the world. Do a little of your own research and make your own choices. That's what it's all about. That's really what everything I do is all about. I mean, I am just a dude who wanted to know what the hell was going on out here. And once I started looking around, I realized I didn't know very much. And the world is a vast and complex place. So I've just been doing research and trying to learn and sharing that process with all of you on here. Because you can't save the world. The world's not even meant to be saved. But you can become a more educated and intelligent person that leads a better life for yourself and your family and your community. That is real purpose in my mind. And in my mind, it all comes down to education. And education is not the classroom. It's not the teacher. We're all taught to think of education as the stuff we see happening outside of ourselves. That's not learning. That's teaching. That's all just dancing monkeys making scenarios within which they hope you will become more educated. Even the best teachers can only curate experiences and situations in which you will be inspired to learn something. But the learning is yours. And that's what's happening inside of you. It's a choice. In life, you become what you want to learn. It's really that simple. If you don't want to become anything, don't learn anything. Just keep on keeping on. But if you want to learn, you can learn anything. You can literally learn anything. You got to do the work and take the time and put in your hours and all that. But you can learn about basically anything. and you can learn to do way more than you think you could do. So I hope you learned something today. I hope that this helped you put some pieces together in your own awareness about what the fuck is actually going on and why life is so hard for so many people right now. Doing something about it in your own life and collectively in our culture is an awfully long road. And who knows how it's going to go. But I figure that an app like Buyer is a pretty good place to start.
That would be enough to collapse the current paradigm and change the whole planet.
That's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you want to check out Buyer, you can go to buyerapp.com. That'll be linked in the description below. You can sign up for the beta on that website, or if it's already out, you can download it on the Play Store and the App Store and play with it to your heart's content. I really appreciate it if you subscribe to my channel, you like the video, you share the video. And if you want anything else from me, you can go to canceliancarol.com for shirts and for news and for all kinds of riffraff. That's it for today. I got some traveling to do. We're running all around the Northwest right now. Right now we're in the kitchen. Next week we'll be over in Idaho. So I guess for now, just drink your water, do something nice for someone, and tell someone you love them. And we'll see you next time.
Conspiracy theories are dangerous.
Information is the oxygen of a democracy.
With Republicans, with progressives, with libertarians, because this is not about right and left, this is about right and wrong.
It's so sacred we can't talk about it.
Our security is at stake.